we do storytelling with puppets, it's not necessary to hide behind the stage, because when you do puppetry, you don't exist. The children are looking right at the character. They don't even know you're there. Now, why do we use puppets? First of all, children identify with puppets. They can be freer with puppets. They can express emotions that maybe they're not allowed to express around the house. Also, you can use a puppet as a wonderful example of how a child should behave by a negative example. There's nothing better in the world than a naughty puppet that won't sit still, that talks to its neighbor, and so on. And when the children see this behavior in the puppet, they will be the first ones to correct that behavior. They'll tell that puppet, "Now, don't do that." Because all the day long, they're getting people telling them, "Don't do this, don't do that." It's a joy and a release to be able to say that to somebody or something else, especially not somebody bigger than they are. So children love to be able to use puppets as an example. And I would like to give you a really quick example of, if I can find the tape, what did I do with it? I was really organized, too, this morning, too. There it is. I wanted to give you some examples of some kinds of puppets from around the world. Ours is the only culture, by the way, that does not have a strong puppetry tradition. And I'm going to show you a very quick example, and I'm going to narrate through this, of some of the hundreds and hundreds of kinds of puppets from around the world. And so I want to open up your horizons here a little bit. So don't be... Some of these may be very familiar characters to you. Kukla, Fran and Ollie, Topo Gijo, and Fozzie and Kermit and their creators, Jim Henson and Frank Oz. The most common kind of puppets in the world are the hand puppets. Mr. Punch of Punch and Judy fame is one of the oldest and most famous puppets in the world. This is a puppet master from China. You'll see more of his work later. The expression that can be contained in a human hand, the body language that's capable, is truly remarkable. Is that too low for you guys in the back? I'll prop it up. Again, this is the Chinese master Yang Feng. He's been training since he was 3 years old. Third generation puppetry. Yang Feng again. I do not expect this in the first lesson. It could be something as simple as a glove will make a wonderful hand puppet. Another kind of hand puppet that's very common and that most people are familiar with are the Muppets or mouth puppets. The word Muppet was coined by the late Jim Henson to mean the word mouth and puppet together, and that's basically any puppet that can do this. This, by the way, is incorrect. You don't want to make a puppet say hello, you want it to say hello. Well, there's a bookworm. There's an idea. Mouth puppets are great at just talking. They don't do very much else, though. String puppets or marionettes are a little complex. The best description I've ever heard of a marionette was from a professional puppeteer who once worked on Howdy Doody, who said that a marionette is really a pendulum, and when you're operating a marionette, you are not operating the puppet, but the strings. These are Italian puppets. They can weigh up to 80 pounds apiece. They're fully armored and could be as tall as 5 feet. String puppets are great for doing what humans do on a more epic scale, or a more exaggerated scale. They can be highly technical or they can be very simple. In your packets later, you'll notice there's a very simple formula for a scarf puppet made just out of scarves. Rod puppets, are puppets that are operated, as you would think, by rods. They're done in a variety of ways. Sometimes the puppeteer is in full view of the audience, as in Bruce Schwartz's wonderful puppets. He's from California. He does a lot of transformational things, myths, legends, historical episodes. He takes a great deal of time with his costumes. The one thing you might notice that is highly effective about this kind of puppetry, there are no backgrounds, there's no scenery, and you're forced to focus only on the characters. Sometimes the puppeteers become part of the scenery or the set, or facilitate things. This was a play about the Holocaust, as seen through the eyes of an old German man, and the puppeteer and he had a special relationship. When the puppet cooked a plate of eggs, the puppeteer ate it for him. This show, by the way, was presented entirely in German and was one of the most moving presentations I ever saw. Rod puppets can also be done in a curtain of light, or as they call it, black theater, where there's a curtain of light on either side and the puppeteers are dressed in black, and then you just don't see them at all. They can be as simple as these French puppets, a stick through the top of the head and a suitcase. And they have their own charm. You'll also notice we haven't had a word of dialogue in here, and we haven't needed it. If there's any one heretical thing I'm going to say today, is that we depend entirely too much on language. Because puppets do better than they say. Now, these are Japanese bunraku puppets. It can take 2 to 3 operators to operate one character, and a Japanese bunraku person takes 10 to 15 years training just on the feet before they move to left hand and body, and then another 30 years before they become masters and can operate the puppets' heads. There's the wayang golek. Rod puppets are great at transformational things, myth. This is, by the way, from Beauty and the Beast, or that one was. And they can also be a little bit avant-garde. This was a telling of Medusa. Pandora. Pandora's box. Shadow puppets are possibly the most simple and elegant and probably the most affordable and most within your reach. They, because these kind of puppets can be snipped out of oak tag, cardboard, and acetate gels. There's the old lady who swallowed the fly. Pecos Bill. Jumping Mouse, giving his eyesight to the buffalo. Pecos Bill taming the first horse, riding the hurricane. There's Jumping Mouse again. Shadow puppets don't need to be black. They can be done in color, and simply or very complex. That's how cowboys used to catch cows before Pecos Bill taught them how. That was done very effectively. It was done with a storyteller in front, telling the story, doing the voices, playing some music, and the puppeteer behind doing the shadow puppets. Those are also Javanese puppets. Those are done on buffalo hide. And in some cultures, the men sit on the side of the screen where the puppets are, and the women sit on the other side of the screen and can see only its shadow. These are some puppets that children made themselves. The Witch in the Cottage. You are, well, they're comical. They're easy to make, and they're probably one of the most effective storytelling tools you'll have. It's basically a little body in your face, and you can play any character you want. Body puppets are, these are really on here more for just your personal interest and edification, because body puppets are a little large for the normal storytelling rooms. This dragon was 8.5 feet tall, and the puppeteer is actually inside. It differs from a costume in that the mouth or the eyes can be manipulated a good deal like Big Bird on Sesame Street. The puppeteer for Big Bird, by the way, is only a little taller than me, but with his arm up in the air, Big Bird is really a big bird. This bear happens to be one person, bent over. Two of her arms are the legs of one bear. These are puppets from South America, where the puppeteers are on little rolling stools, have themselves sort of strapped into the puppet. And here are some giant puppets from a festival. These could be between 10 and 12 feet tall. And we're going to be focusing mostly on hand puppets today because I feel that having a mascot is one of the most effective things that a person can do. A simple character that will tell your stories with you, that the children come to see just as much as they come to hear the stories. You know, it could be somebody like, this character could be named, for all I know, Winifred or something, and the children might say, well, I want to go see Winifred, rather than I'd like to hear a particular story. They want to hear how Winifred tells the story. And the whole point of making a character, even as simple as this one, alive, giving it the illusion of life is, well, first we have to start with the basics. If this is the puppet's body, and this is her skeleton, okay? I want you to stop thinking of your hand when you work a puppet as your hand. I want you to think of this as an actor, okay? What we would normally think of as just the digits or the ends of your fingers is now a neck, okay? What you would think of as your knuckles is now that puppet's elbow. What you would think of as your palm is the puppet's tummy. What you would think of as the puppet's wrist, or your wrist, would be the puppet's waist. And where your elbow is, well, that's where the puppet's legs would be if it had legs. But just because a puppet doesn't have legs doesn't mean it can't walk or move around. So basically, by incorporating these different types of things, thinking of it as anatomy, you will be able to teach your puppet how to act like a person. That's what I'm really going to be working with you on today. Observation, focus, and the illusion of life. I'm going to do something really quickly, and I'm going to ask if you can tell me in steps what it is that I'm going to do. What did I just do? Anybody? Oh, you guys are going to have to be... I don't want any problem children here today. What did I do? Tell me what I did. Let's start. What was the first thing I did?
We walked in and walked past the cup.
Okay, then what did I do?
Looked back at it.
Wait, somebody said, now see, this is a perfect example. One person said I noticed the cup, and one person said I tasted from the cup, okay? We went past it, then he noticed it. Now the reason is that what I want you to do is I want you to not think of somebody coming on. If I did what you were suggesting back there, I would have come on, noticed it, picked it up, and drank from it right away. What I actually did was I passed it, I went back, I doubled back, I observed the cup. I took a minute to look at the cup, and then I went over and I touched the cup to see what it was made out of, maybe. Then I picked the cup up. Maybe I could have tested its weight, looked in the cup, drank from the cup, tasted something bitter, then put it down, then I walked away. So what I did there actually, instead of just a simple movement such as you went in, picked up the cup, drank from it, which is really maybe 4 movements, it was really anywhere between 8 and 12 movements. It is the ability to break down those movements that will make your puppet seem alive. Many times when I'm working with a character, a puppet character, I'll put it on for the first time, and I'll make observations about the character. First of all, he's a bird, right? Now birds, one of the things you'll notice, what are you doing? Well, you're looking at them? Good. That's focus, you see, because the bird is now noticing things about the room. And because it's independent of what I'm doing, it has the illusion of, don't do that, please. It has the illusion of life. And don't do that, please, there's nothing in there. So, anyway, So basically the trick of it is, to make sure that when your puppet character gives the... Now you see, another thing is if I were to take this bird, I could also say that the bird, because his eyes are set so far on the side of his head, in order to look at you, he could be doing this. But that doesn't translate into a natural movement. People don't do that. So what I'm doing is, also a bird, when it moves like this. They're jerky, but that would be a little distracting. So what I did was I anthropomorphized this character and gave it a habit that the children could identify with, which is basically getting distracted by something that isn't really important at all, and trying to continue on like you would do in a normal situation with trying to ignore the distraction, you see. And that's a situation that sets up a comedic response. So when you watch the children and you watch how they relate to each other, because you will pick up a ton of wonderful ideas just from observing how three children will look at the same book and what their reactions will be to that same book. Three completely different personalities and three completely different points of view, and if you put that into your puppet characters, it will always ring true. Now the one thing, my biggest pet peeve, and I will show it to you right now, is first of all, what I'm doing right now should never be done in front of a child. Don't do this, okay? Because, now most of the time they'll ignore it, but there'll be one or two children who will be disturbed by you putting this character on. I'm talking about the smaller children now. But basically, if you put the character, this character has to live somewhere. It can live in your handbag, it can live in a box, it could live in a book, it could live behind the stage. You can be talking to the children, put this puppet on, and then bring your character out, okay? It should have some place that it lives, all right? That they can always depend on. That's where that puppet character comes from. The other thing that makes me crazy is a person will be talking to the puppet, and then the children will do something over there, and the puppeteer will go, "Don't do that, please, don't do that over there, because, you know..." I give it CPR now, you know, she just died on me. Don't do that, because if your character stops reacting, stops moving, you've lost the illusion of life. Okay? Focus is important because this is where it takes a little practice. Learning to make the puppet's eyes go where you want it to go. Okay? There's no substitute for having a mirror and taking a character home and looking in the mirror and looking at where the character is looking. And after a while, you'll get instinctual about it. If you're reading a book, the puppet can be looking in the book. In fact, the puppet could be so much in the way that you can't see the book. And there's a situation right there. Okay? Reading over somebody's shoulder is another one. There's a million ways that you can do this, but basically the main way that a puppet learns how to do these things is by observation. And that means you have to observe, decide on an action, like picking up a cup, and then you have to teach it to your puppet. Now, how do you teach it to your puppet? Well, the real trick of this is teaching you how to teach it to your puppet. So I'm going to need somebody from the audience, somebody out here, please help. Somebody. Thank you, thank you. Let's give her a round of applause for being brave. All right. Okay, now let's see. We have a real simple character here for you. And basically, are you righty or lefty?
Right.
Okay, because I do make some of these right-handed and some of them left-handed. Your hands are, this is lower than this, so if you're going to hold them like that, you can have it 2 fingers or you can have it 1 finger. There's lots of different methods, but this is one and this is one. The advantage to this one is that you can make a puppet say no. Usually, you can make a puppet say no by doing that. Okay? But with 1 finger will work just as well for what we're going to do. So we'll give you that to put on. Okay? All right. And now, what we're going to do is we're going to teach your puppet to jump. Okay? First thing that you have to do is you have to jump. Okay? So just take a little jump. All right. Now, your puppet was not watching. So you're going to have to do that again. One more time. Okay, now, let's see if we can help the puppet. What was the first thing that she did before she actually jumped? What was the first thing that she did? Does anybody know? Her arms went down. Okay, let's do that. And then what else did she do? She bent her knees. Now, your knees are down here at your elbows. So to bend your knees, what you're going to do really is you're going to bend at the waist slightly, which is here, and you're going to bring your elbow down. So bring your elbow down and bend at the waist. There you go. And now, when you jump, she came up, and her arms, what happened to her arms? Her arms went out, and then they came back down again. And when she landed, what happened? Did she just land and stop, or did she center herself a little bit? Okay? All right, so now let's do that again, and this time we're going to have the puppet jump, and let's see, we'll do it in slow motion first. Okay, first thing she did was she put her arms down, put your elbow down, put your wrist down, yeah, there you go, and she jumped, arms up, then down, and then she centered, okay? She had a little trouble finding, the floor, okay? But she did it, no, it was a first try. You did extremely well, okay? All right, one more time, and this time we'll do it a little bit faster, okay? Are you ready? Good, okay. All right, one more time. We're going to put your arms down and jump, and then down. There we go. Very good. All right, let's give her a round of applause. Yeah. Okay. Now that you've seen this isn't so bad, who else is going to come up and help? Come on, come on.
I will.
Thank you. Come on up. All right, now we're going to teach your puppet how to drink. Okay. All right. There's nothing hard in here, okay? Just letting you know, all right? We don't want any puppets being influenced badly, okay? Now, before she gets going, we're going to have to show her how you do this, all right? So first what we're going to do is we're going to break this down, okay? What do you do first when you see a cup? You look in it. That's good, okay? And then what do? You smell it. That's good. Pick it up, right? Very good. Good. Oh, good. Okay, and a sound effect, too. All right, now let's see if we can get your... That's always effective. It works very well. Okay, now we're going to teach your puppet, okay, how to do the same thing. All right, first thing what we did was she went over, she looked in the cup, okay, smelled the cup, picked up the cup. It's a little tough. Hey, it's her first time. There you go. Very good. Okay. Did you react to, when you drank out of the cup, did you react to what was in the cup? You smiled. Now, how do you make the puppet smile? That's a very good question. You can't. But you can make a puppet look happy. So a puppet can clap its hands. A puppet can do a little dance. A puppet can go, and rub its tummy. Okay? All right, very good. Let's have somebody else up there. Thank you very much. One more. One more person, please, please. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a walk. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to observe. Now, this is a little tough because, as you may notice, the puppet is missing some very fundamental equipment to carry this out, okay? So what we need to do really is observe when a person walks from the waist up and notice what do they do. Could you take small steps, please? Okay. All right. Now turn around. All right. Your puppet's not watching. Make sure. Good. Okay, now make big steps. Okay. What's the basic difference between small steps and big steps in her posture? Okay, there's one. That's a good question. Arms, swing. What else? Okay. What about the top of her head? Take long strides. What happens to the top of her head? There we go. Okay, it goes up and down. Now, basically, to make your puppet walk, what you're doing is you're working with your elbow. Your elbow is the puppet's legs, and this is the puppet's waist. So what you're going to do is these are two steps. One step is you need to make the puppet go up and down as it walks. The longer the strides, the deeper the dip. If the puppet takes little steps, if the puppet takes long steps, and then the next step is to move your arm. You're moving your entire arm in a circular motion, and that'll give you the illusion of, right. Well, of course. You go your way, I'll go mine. Right, okay, here we go. So let's take little steps. Let's start with little steps. Moving your arm. Okay, right. You can also put a little waist movement in there, too, because a puppet sometimes will walk with a little forward movement to the waist. What I'm doing here is I'm going like this, as well as going up and down. Okay? All right? There you go. Thank you very much. Let's give her a nice round of applause as well. We're going to go from here to talk about physical type, because there is nothing in fairy tales that is more obvious than physical type. people are sometimes not even discussed as who they are or what they are, except for what they seem to be on the outside. There's a million fairy tales about a king. What kind of king? There are stories about giants or dragons. Now that seems to me to say that the storyteller felt that all he needed to do was tell you a physical type, and you would get an illusion. Well, as a puppeteer, that is somehow strictly true. You need to add other things, of course, but physical type does dictate the way a person walks, for an example. A king would have great posture. A king would have regal bearing. A king would stop a bit between each step because he's not in any hurry. A giant, on the other hand, would stride. The giant would loom. The giant would look where he was going because otherwise he would step on a farmhouse or a village or a cow, for God's sake. That's a horrible thing to step in. So, a physical type will dictate the kind of walk your puppet will do. And sometimes a walk is all it takes. A child will immediately identify a character by his walk. If you have 3, 4 characters in a story, make them different. Then we get into the character. Is the character shy? Could be a shy king. The king could be greedy. Right? Okay, so the character of a person is different than their physical type, but it's just as important in getting out how your character behaves, okay? Another thing that people forget about is that a puppet, in order to get the illusion of life, a puppet is a person. And people, we have one thing in common. We're all doing it right now. We're breathing. Puppets breathe. When they're sleeping, they really breathe. Puppet sighs, okay? Those little things really bring across the illusion of life. Listening is something important. When another character is on stage interacting with this one, when one puppet talks, ideally, the other one should listen. Hello, how are you? I guess I'm okay. When one character is talking or moving, they should be moving, and the other character should be staying relatively still, unless his action requires him to do something else. Okay? Go pick up those rocks. Faster. Faster. Okay? That can be a little tricky for a first-time puppeteer, doing 2 different things at the same time. It's the same thing as rubbing your stomach and patting your head, and that just takes a little bit of practice. But the real trick, and luckily, one of the things that is good for you to do, is when one character is acting and acting, the other character should be reacting to that character. And give your puppets time to do that. Give your puppets the time to react to something, to think about something. We all do it. Nobody springs into action the minute something is said to them. So that is something that also will help to convey the character. The character's posture. These are all things that I'd like you to think about when you do a story, when you read a story. Go a little deeper. The author may not give you everything you need, and you may need to delve a little deeper. Sometimes you can tell a story without using any of the author's words. We've seen good picture books done this way, but there's also a lot to be said for movement. Movement, body language, it tells a lot, and a child picks that up instinctively. This is a world full of giants, and he knows what this means. Okay? So that's something that we really need to think about when you do storytelling. What I would really like to see banished in my lifetime is the kind of storytelling like this. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? What this does is it interrupts the flow of the story, and we're looking at something static, and we do this again, and then we look at something static, and it's hypnotic. It'll put you to sleep. But if you can take a character and say,
What happened next? What happened next? I want to see the picture. Can we see the picture? I'd like to see the picture, please.
Then the children are distracted from the movement of you changing the picture. And then you can do this, and oh, I can't say, oh, that's nice. And then you can ask for questions from the audience. What do you think he's doing? Okay? And it could be the puppet asking them these questions. And it will be that will allow them to feel free enough to talk, because they may not answer you. But if this is here, they're not looking at you. This is entirely more interesting than the rest of us. There's something that will draw their focus every time. This is another stigma. Most people think if you're a puppeteer, you have to be a ventriloquist. There's nothing further than the truth. They will, I mean, you may get one 8-year-old who will go, I saw your lips move. But most of the time, you're going to have children completely, totally focused on that puppet character, so they're not going to pay any attention to you. Now, let's talk about voice really quickly. Voice is one of your most effective tools as a storyteller. As I did the characters in Clever Gretel, I couldn't have picked 2 more disparate voices. You know, the voice of the stern, rough character and Gretel's kind of soft voice. Actually, voices are not as hard as people think they are. The trick in voices is to try to make your voices as different as you can. When I do my shows, I do a variety of voices. I go all the way out and do Jack Nicholson for some shows. And then sometimes, you know, I can do voices that kids are familiar with. Hi, Kermit the Frog here. I can do things like that. But the trick of doing voices, especially in storytelling, is making sure your voices don't sound too much the same. So we have a ton of different options. You have the falsetto voice.
I have a little character, his name is Squeak, and he's got an Italian accent, and I don't know if everybody should do accents. You know, they're kind of tough to do, you know. But anyway, he just talks like this.
And then he has a brother named Pip, and he's very deep, and he sounds a little bit like Cary Grant, all right?
Now, the trick is to change from one
to the other very quickly. Now, that's not difficult.
The two is if you do it like maybe 2 characters that sound very much the same.
Then you can't switch. If you switch from one voice to another voice, and the both of them are pretty much the same, then you're going to have some trouble changing from one to the other. It's difficult. It's a lot easier to go from a falsetto voice to a guttural voice than it is to go from a medium voice to a medium voice. So basically, when you find your characters, find voices that are on a wide enough range if they're going to talk to each other. And that just takes a little bit of planning before you start. There's no reason an authoritative king
can't talk like this.
Tells us something different about the king, doesn't it? Can add an element to the story the author may never have imagined. Okay? There's also a lot of other things, too. You can work with your voices
Right back in your throat. You can go, ah!
Make a voice way back in your throat. Or you can be nasal, talk through your nose. Okay? So there's whole seminars on voice. And I'm not going to pretend that we're going to get to any of that really today. But I am just going to let you know that you have to, when you try to do this stuff, broaden your horizons, shoot for the moon. For example, let's talk about the boy who swallowed the ocean. Remember that character?
I always thought it would be kind of fun if he talked like this.
Okay, so, I mean, he swallowed an ocean, for goodness sake. You know, sounds like those old film strips.
Today we're going to learn about the human heart.
Right? Okay. So basically, voice can add a whole other element. What I would really like you to focus on, though, is the action in the story, because puppets do better than they say. They are much more interesting dancing, fighting, jumping, running, than they are standing and talking to each other. An exercise you might try, too, that works extremely well with puppets, is take a familiar story like Little Red Riding Hood and draw up a series of, or Xerox, if you want to do that, a series of events that happen in the place of the story. The mother telling her to stay on the path, the big bad wolf, Grandma's house, the woodsman, or whatever the end of the story is in that particular version. And then you take those panels and you put them on the board in any order and ask them what happens first. And let's see if we can put the story together. What would happen if the wolf came first? And when you start to adapt your own stories from classics, that's the first question you have to ask yourself. What comes first? Where does the story really start? Okay, the story of Little Red Riding Hood starts when her mother says, stay on the path. But does the action start there? Not necessarily. The action starts when that wolf comes jumping out of the trees. Okay? That's where the action starts. So we need to preface that with something. But do we need to be at the house? Maybe we could have her already on the path, and then she could be talking to a bird and talk about her mother said that she had better stay on the path, she can't look at the flowers, and so on. So we can take a story and adapt it for ourselves. That's something that is excusable, because if it will interest them in reading the 50,000 other versions of the story that are out there, then you can have them in that section reading those other stories and see how they're different. A child would love to see how many different ways there are doing a story. Now, we're going to take a break in just a few minutes, and when we get back, we're going to turn you guys into puppeteers. We're also going to do some shadow puppets as well. I have a box here. Now, this is a box, and if you want to take any notes, these are the notes to take, is to make yourself a box like this. This box is your source box for when you become a puppet player, okay? We have a first section is physical type, all right, like we suggested. Monster, toddler, ballet dancer, cowboy, king, hero, okay? Then we have character. Giggly, confused, sloppy, okay, nervous, sneaky. Then we have movement, okay? Movement is every time you have a card like this, movement card, that's a single thought, okay? A single thought that becomes an action. Crying is a whole sketch in itself, okay? Making a puppet cry. There's so many ways that you can make a character cry, and you can explore that. You pull that card out. You bend backwards. That's pretty... Don't do that either. I've done that. I've done a show with the puppet facing the wrong way for 5 minutes, and the kids will say, "He's looking the wrong way!" Thank you.
What was that? That was so interesting back there.
Okay. So you can have a character. Now, a character, if they're crying, we're going to somber the mood up a little bit. A character can just be a little, just a tear. Or it could be crushed. And we can go from that, from one to the other. We can explore the whole spectrum. So the movement cards, crying, clapping, dancing. Dancing, I mean, there's a million ways, a million variants. Walking, running, hopping, waving, yawning, those are movements. Senses, okay? This is another thing. Now, anything having to do with the five senses. Hearing, hungry, being hungry. Touching something pleasant, touching something unpleasant. Touching something squishy, okay? Everything that you explore or examine, just like the children, is completely new. And that's what your puppet should show when it emotes. Your puppet should make it seem like everything is completely new. Emotion. Well, emotion is obviously something that we think of right away with the puppet character. But if we can combine emotion with movement or with the character or with the physical type, mixing and matching these cards, digging in here, pulling them out, and then standing in front of a mirror and trying to make that thing happen, that's where you really perfect your craft, okay? When we get back from taking a little break, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have people pick some cards out of here. We're going to take some puppets. We're going to go behind the stage in groups or one at a time. I have brought, for your edification and amusement, props. Okay? And we're going to see you manipulate the character in his environment, okay? Because if we don't get over being shy about this in front of our peers, we're never going to be able to stand up for the most demanding audience in the world. So let's take about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back and do some cards.